Alright, so the Eagles shared some plans for training camp while Jaylen Carter's losing weight. Yeah, that's a great thing for Jordan Davis. Also, Vic Fangio may not be satisfied with the safety position, while Philly made it official and signed another nickel cornerback. Plus, the Birds could be looking at adding another weapon to the offense, so let's talk about it. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? I hope you all had a great weekend and also a happy later Mother's Day to all the great moms out there. Also, congrats to all the recent jersey winners lately, as the jerseys have been purchased and are en route. But don't worry, if you haven't been lucky enough to win the giveaways yet, we're going to have one later this week, so stay tuned. But let's start with the NFL releasing some of the most iconic plays and ridiculous moments in NFL history. And really not surprising for Philly to be on this list multiple times. Like, for example, the miracle at the Meadowlands in 1978, where the Giants had a for sure, no doubt win until, well, fumbling with 30 seconds remaining and Herm Edwards recovering the scoop and score to win 19-17. I mean, New York didn't know what hit them. However, as we all know, history repeated itself in 2010 with the miracle at the new Meadowlands, when Philly rallied down 21 points with 8 minutes to play. And then punter Matt Dodge decided to foolishly kick it to Dejean Jackson, with D-Jack making him pay, weaving and running through the punt coverage to complete the miraculous comeback, to obviously the joy and excitement of all of us Philly fans and at the expense of Giants head coach Tom Coughlin. Or how about the 4th and 26 play in 2004 versus the Green Bay Packers? When facing 26 yards to get a first down with just over 1 minute to play, Donovan McNabb found Freddie Mitchell for a 28-yard gain to keep the drive alive, eventually leading to a David Akers field goal to force overtime, and then shortly after a Brett Favre pick, another David Akers field goal in overtime to win the game. I mean, I still remember that, and that game was just insane. Of course, we've been fortunate on the other end of field goals as well, like the double doink in Chicago in the 2018 wildcard game. However, as unbelievable as these plays are, personally, I still gotta go with the Philly special just for the unreal confidence to pull that off in the Super Bowl and the ramifications of what it eventually led to. Okay, that's probably not a surprise, but what about y'all though? What's your favorite, most iconic, or unbelievable play in franchise history? Anyway, while we're on the topic of Eagles and Patriots, Philly's director of scouting, Brandon Hunt, will officially be returning for another year, after not getting the executive vice president role as it unsurprisingly went to incumbent Elliott Wolf. So obviously, no compensatory picks since there's no move, yet either way, Hunt has continued to garner interest. And even though New England didn't choose him, we will see more of the Patriots this offseason. After ESPN's Mike Reese shared head coaches Gerard Mayo and Nick Sirianni will likely stage a joint practice in New England during the preseason. Although despite Vic Fangio pushing for as many as possible, Mayo prefers just a single practice to limit fighting that can sometimes become prevalent on a second day.
Come get a taste.
I mean, that's fair because I think we've all seen things can sometimes get out of hand. Like last offseason with the Colts fight that broke out in Kelsey blindsiding Zaire Franklin.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
All right, on a serious note, though, these practices are really a good thing. I mean, honestly, it's probably better than the preseason because most of the time we see the starters get held out and they don't even play. So this is kind of your pre-regular season gift that you're going to get. This is the only action those starters will see, so you got to take advantage of it. And speaking of starters, one dude in particular that Fangio has really high hopes for is Jaylen Carter.
He's talented enough that no matter what we do with him, we'll be maximizing him. He's got to get in great shape, which I think he's off to a great start here, and so we can play him a lot.
Not gonna lie, but for the rest of the league, that should be a very scary thought. Like, this dude had 6 sacks and 47 pressures in his rookie season, and while that's pretty good, those of us watching him know what kind of impact he really had. Now sure, towards the end of the season, he did appear to hit some sort of rookie wall, but that's kind of customary for a lot of guys at the position. However, can you imagine Jaylen Carter being moved all over the line to take advantage of his strengths and quickness this season? I mean, he's already impressed guys like Devin White during a couple voluntary workouts, plus reports surfaced of Jaylen losing weight and already being in really good shape. So yeah, it's a foregone conclusion at this point, the bread man's gonna take it to a different level. I guess the question is, what's the different level? And also, what do you set the total for his over-under on sacks total this season? Honestly, I'm not concerned about JC at all. It's really more of JD that I'm unsure about. Because yeah, technically he took a step forward with his conditioning and was more active and productive early on, yet he eventually admitted to not being in the type of shape he needed to be to make it a full season. Also, let's not forget the Eagles apparently were fining or at least threatening to fine him for being overweight during the season last year, which again is why I'm more concerned about Jordan Davis being ready and available than I am Jaylen Carter. Trust me, I get it. Jordan Davis is not the end-all be-all for the defense or even really for the D-line. But if, and yes, that's a big if, he can play up to the level and potentially he has, then the run defense is going to be one of the best in the league. The question is, how much do you trust JD to be in that type of shape, and what type of production do you expect from him? Personally, I'm not going all in with JD, but I do think he'll be better. The good news is that Milton Williams is still right there and hasn't even scratched the surface of his full potential. So maybe now, in a contract year and in Fangio's scheme, the 25-year-old can prove Tom Donahoe wrong, after the Eagles' senior advisor not showing quite the same enthusiasm for Howie's pick back in 2021. Either way, I guess we could say this: Jaylen Carter is going to be fine, but someone's going to have to step up next to him, especially within that rotation, and I guess that's kind of similar of what you could say for the wide receiver 3 position. Because listening to Kellen Moore talk about the offense and a closer look at his style guarantees you the Eagles are going to use wide receiver 3 more often than we've seen. But no, it's not going to be crazy usage since you have more than a few options who will get first priority. Although still, wide receiver 3 is important. And you already know, but my first option would be Anaya Smith because that dude's a gamer. And really, just a better way to put it, everything that Quez Watkins wasn't. Also, not that this is solidifying anything, but I love seeing A.J. Brown be one of the first ones to text Smith after he was drafted, saying, "Congrats, but put on your hard hat and let's work." I mean, kudos to Swole Batman for leading by example and continually going out of his way to reach out to the younger guys and bring him along for the ride. But A.J.'s not the only one with big expectations for Anaya, since Sirianni and Moore both love the idea of adding him to the offense. Given his quick burst and yards after catch ability and work ethic to never take a playoff while competing on every single snap. However, I know it's easy to get overhyped on a rookie and not allow them some time and patience to slowly get into the offense and get adjusted to the speed and really just ease into the overall scheme in general. Which is why NBC's Reuben Frank thinks Smith is more of a long-range project and not someone ready to go in year 1, saying he expects Avonte Parker to get the first crack at Quez Watkins' old role. And maybe so, but my gosh, for a guy who ranked dead last the last 4 years in his ability to separate from cornerbacks, I'm not sure that's who I want as my wide receiver 3. Plus, Parker's played mostly on the outside, so I don't even know if that makes as much sense to be in the slot anyway. Personally, if you're going to go with someone on the roster, I'd say Paris Campbell, because he's played more on the inside and has at least better separation than Parker, plus has 4.3 speed. Yes, I realize speed isn't everything because we said the exact same thing about Quez, and look what happened. And maybe the Campbell signing was more of a Sirianni thing anyway, plus he's only had 1 season over 170 yards in his 5 years in the league, which is why Rube believes the Eagles' third receiver ultimately isn't on the roster yet. But alright, I'm curious what y'all think. Do you think the receiver is on the roster right now, and if so, who is it? And then the second part to that is, for those that don't believe the receiver's on the roster, then what's your strategy to find the next one? Honestly, I'd still give Anaya Smith the first shot. I mean, you got a ton of time between now and training camp, but even get into training camp, figure out what he's about, if he can adjust to the system pretty quickly, and if not, then look at a team who has maybe a surplus of options, or at that point, fine, you go try to sign an acquisition or someone off free agency. Yes, I realize free agency will be slim pickings at that point, so maybe you go with a surplus of a team who has tons of receivers. By the way, my team to keep an eye on in that scenario would be the Houston Texans, because the amount of wide receivers they have on the roster is insane, with guys like Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Robert Woods, Noah Brown, John Metchie, and even Ben Skoranek, which is why Pro Football Network's Anthony DeBona suggested the Eagles trade for Devontae Smith's former Bama teammate in John Metchie not too long ago. And seriously, you could get him for really cheap given that surplus, seeing that he's barely gotten back into action after the ACL and beating leukemia. But even in limited snaps, I think it's obvious to see he has the toughness after the catch and a solid understanding in the slot. Yet fine, if that's too high of a price, then what about Noah Brown? Another dude Anthony's brought up before. Because unlike some of the other guys, Brown has recent production you can point to, with 2 straight seasons over 550 yards, despite being at best the number 3 option in the offense. Plus, he's very familiar with Kellen Moore's scheme, having run it a couple years in Dallas, so it could prove to be a seamless fit. Look, I know they've been brought up before, but I think Houston makes even more sense now given the plethora of receivers they have. Or if you want to just sign someone without even trade, then what about Hunter Renfrow? Sure, he didn't have a good season last year with 25 catches for 255 yards, which is why he ultimately got released. Yet he's no doubt got the best resume from the options mentioned and linked to Philly, with nearly 3,000 yards and 17 touchdowns in his career. Plus, this wouldn't be totally out of left field since the Eagles were rumored to have interest in Renfrow around the trade deadline and are constantly linked to the 28-year-old anyway. And yeah, Renfrow's probably not your long-term answer, but if you want someone to come in for a season while you're looking at getting Anaya Smith ready to take over in a full-time capacity, then maybe it's worth a look. Because I think it's a given that not only does Renfrow bring the Worksman-type character to the squad, but he could really add a unique element of crisp route running from the slot to allow Kellen Moore to win in the short to intermediate areas on the field. I don't know, I wouldn't hate it, but let me know what you guys think about this potential move, or maybe even other options you want to look into. One that Reuben Frank would suggest is adding a backup safety, since the underlying assumption is that C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship are the starters. However, there's not a lot of proven production past that, citing Sidney Brown returning from an ACL injury, former undrafted free agent Mekhi Garner looking the part at 6'2", 210, but only playing 27 snaps last season, and then Cooper Dejean definitely having the potential, but Rube said it's hard to imagine the Eagles throwing him right into the mix at safety while he's still learning to be an NFL corner. And then that's about it as far as any notable or worthy, viable potential options are. So Rube said that, you need to maybe possibly make another move. Unfortunately, no, it's not the thought of Justin Simmons. Although, as we said for months at this point, the longer time goes on, the lower his asking price gets, so I suppose it's not impossible. However, 14-year veteran Kareem Jackson was recently tied to the Eagles, and even though he was serviceable in Houston, Howie Roseman made it pretty clear that they're in the business of getting younger on the defense. Yes, I realize some of the older vets as potential backups are not the worst thing in the world, but I mean, if you're going to go that route, why don't you just wait and see Eddie Jackson? Yes, I talked about Justin Simmons a second ago, but Eddie Jackson, another guy who Vic Fangio knows, familiar with his system. Maybe the asking price gets to a certain point where you say, hey, bring you in. You could be a backup, possibly start if you have to. That's where I would go. Not really Kareem Jackson, 36 years old. I'd have to pass. One thing that is for certain is the Eagles officially announced they signed cornerback Shon Stevens while releasing tight end Noah Togai. Remember, this had been practically guaranteed last week, but officially official now. Also, it sounds like Stevens will be playing nickel, with Anthony DeBona sharing a source confirmed that position's for Stevens. And let's just say it gets even more interesting for all the guys in the bubble in a crowded cornerback room. But while we're on the topic of signings, the Eagles also announced they've signed rookies Jalix Hunt, Will Shipley, and Anaya Smith to contracts, leaving only 4 to round out the class. And no one should be worried that they're not going to get done. However, let's just say it's a given that the Eagles aren't done adding to the roster and Howie's got money to spend, which could mean before camp or even after camp. Since remember, that's when he ended up bringing in C.J. Gardner-Johnson the first time. Anyway, we'll see how it turns out, but got some really cool giveaways coming up, so make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Till next time, I'll catch y'all then. This has been the Philly Special.